Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Utah Film Pod. My name is Josh Terry. I'm your host, along with Danny Hatch and Mark LaRocco. It's been a couple of weeks, guys. How you been?
Really good. I think Mark has a lot of news.
Yeah, Mark probably has the most newsworthy announcement, life change stuff to present. No pressure.
Yes, I have the best news probably. We
For
had
sure.
a baby. We had a baby girl last Sunday, or 2 Sundays ago. So 2 weeks old. Her name's Audrey.
Congratulations.
After Audrey Hepburn.
Congrats.
And
Seriously?
Partly, yeah. We
Yeah?
like the name, and she's a great actress. It's a classy lady, humanitarian.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny that the name, it kind of came down to two names that we were talking about in the hospital after she was born. And it was Audrey and Eliza. And then I pointed out to Holly, I said, wait a minute, Eliza Doolittle is the name of Audrey Hepburn's character in that movie we don't like, My Fair Lady.
Oh, that you don't like?
And we don't really know. We watched it. It was on Netflix. We watched it about a year ago. And man, it's surprisingly dated. If you see it, you'll know what I mean. It's
My Fair Lady.
misogynistic.
I was going to say, is that the one with Mickey Rooney?
No. You're thinking of Breakfast at Tiffany's, which also has its own problems.
That
with
one
Mr.
didn't
Yunioshi.
age as well either.
But like there are scenes where he is Henry Higgins is just like verbally abusing Eliza for like
sure, yeah.
Not learning fast enough, but then also for making him fall in love with her. And he's like almost swearing at her and berating her. And it kind of goes on and on and on. It's not just like one line, like it goes on for a while. And so it's a little bit annoying, but I mean, I think some of the songs are amazing. They're great. And it's really good production values. And I can see why it was kind of a hit movie at the time. But anyway, we were talking and we just kind of leaned toward Audrey at the end and decided to go with that. And so that's her name.
Nice.
Yep.
So this actually ties into a question. Not really related to film, but I think we can throw it in here. I was thinking about this just the other day, like, because it does seem most of the time that people's names match like their looks and their like, you know, like I don't have any trouble saying, oh yeah, he looks like a Mark. You know what I mean? I mean, I don't know if that was the first name that I would think of, but it's a match, it's a fit, right?
Yeah.
And so what I wonder is, you know, having not had the parent experience, like what if you choose a name and then 10 years later, the kid just, I'm sorry, that's just not a Dwayne. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Totally, you know, because, you know.
I think we do that. We think that, but it's because we know people, we associate someone's face with their name. And so that's why it fits in our minds. And so I think with our kids, if we had named a kid another name, we would get used to it. And then that would be their name. And then we couldn't imagine them with any other name, you know? So like, for example, Graham, our fourth boy, it came down to Graham versus Ethan. And I was actually leaning a little bit toward Ethan, but then Holly did a little poll and asked like our family what they thought. And all the girls wanted Graham and the boys wanted Ethan, but many more girls weighed in the poll. And we just went with Graham. And so I can't really imagine him now as an Ethan, right?
Right.
Ethan Hunt, of course, Mission Impossible. And so but I'm sure that if we had named him Ethan, I would say the same thing. I'd say, oh, I can't imagine him as Graham. I look at him and he looks like Ethan. You know?
So it's psychological is what you're saying.
It's a psychological thing. Yeah. It's
They
kind of
so when Frank Zappa would look at his kids, he couldn't see them in any other than Moon Unit, Motorhead, and Dweezil.
Yeah.
Like that's, and I think there was one more. I can't remember the other one, but
yeah, there was one that was kind of a normal name, wasn't there? Or were they
which
all
is, I know it's probably the one I'm forgetting, right?
Yeah.
Because it's normal. But
yeah,
Moon they were Unit. Thinking ahead.
I think that Moon Unit goes by Moon, and considering a lot of celebrity names I've heard, Moon is relatively normal, I guess. Yeah. I don't know.
Might have got off
Moon
easy
Unit.
On that one.
Yeah, if he or she, I don't even know, went by Moon Unit, that might be kind of odd. But yeah. Yes. Dweezil, Motorhead and Dweezil are not great names. We actually crossed those off our list early on.
I'm glad.
Really?
I'm glad. You didn't keep them around as possible middle names, right? Because the middle name that's where you can kind of throw the curveball and
for sure.
Yeah.
You know, because you could have gone Audrey Eliza,
Audrey
Morocco,
Eliza. Well, we
right?
actually went Audrey Evelyn. All of the middle names are actually grandmas and grandpas. So Holly's great
Ah,
grandma was Evelyn.
okay.
So all the
I
kids' middle
love that
names
name.
are great grandpas or grandmas, and we kind of gone down that route. And this was our only girl, so we definitely wanted to get a girl, a grandma or a great grandma. And so yeah, we like the name Evelyn, so that's what we went with for the middle name.
Nice, nice. So not the mighty Thor is
No,
yeah.
no, good transition, by the way.
Well, we're leading off with an unexpected but enjoyable tribute to Aubrey Hepburn, and
Yes.
now we're on to the business of reviewing Thor: Love and Thunder, right? So that's the big one. That's for the biggest recent release. It came out just a little before we recorded this podcast.
Mhm.
But yeah, so I mean, this was the one. I don't, as I think I probably made clear on previous episodes, I don't spend a lot of time tracking what's coming up on the release calendar. But this was one of the few that I knew about, and probably one of the even fewer that I was excited to see. Mark, you saw this one. What was your level of interest in this one? Because I know what Danny's level of interest was. It was zero.
It was zero, yeah.
It
And I
was
remember,
below
I already
zero,
know the
six
answer to that
below.
question.
right. And
right?
Doctor Strange 2 didn't help. I know that's what kind of sealed the deal for her with Marvel. I had pretty high interest and high hopes because of really the third Thor movie, right? Thor
Ragnarok.
Absolutely.
It was just so fresh and so funny and irreverent, and I mean, Chris Hemsworth kind of unlocked his full comic potential. I mean, even in other movies he's in that are comedies, I just don't think I've ever seen him as funny as he was in.
What, you weren't enjoying him in Ghostbusters? Which, to be fair, I
did
think
not see that one.
I think he was
one
of the highlights of that movie.
Yeah, for sure.
Was he?
For sure. Yeah.
Was he like kind of a ditzy receptionist?
Right. Well, that was the joke. It was
Yeah.
kind of playing off the type, and so
Mhm.
instead of having kind of a bimbo character, it was a himbo character.
A mimbo.
Yeah, right. A mimbo. Yeah. No, that was, and he was good in that. I think he's consistently. I'm trying to think. I mean, I think he's been in movies I haven't liked so much, but he's always been an appealing. He's kind of got that movie star appeal where he just he adds more than he takes away. But no. In fact, I think my primary reaction from Ragnarok, which is 5 years ago now, right? Was because it was the tail. It was like November of 2017, so about 4.5 years, pushing 5 years.
Goodness.
Yeah, because it was before Infinity War, before Endgame and all that stuff, and that was 2018, 2019. So it's been a little while on these, but I just remember watching it, and I knew going in that Taika Waititi was the director and that he had done Hunt for the Wilder People, and he was just off the wall and had kind of this really, really dry, fun New Zealand style sense of humor that I think was kind of similar to what we saw in Flight of the Conchords. But even with all of that preparation, I remember watching Ragnarok and just thinking, I can't believe that they're letting him get away with this, because I thought that it would just be a funnier version of a Thor movie, but he was it almost seemed like he was outright mocking superhero movies, and just whether you call it satire or whatever, but he was just going crazy. And so because from where I was coming from in terms of being a fan of the movies, but not like a diehard comic book guy, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed just kind of taking the whole genre and flipping it on its head. And so, so Mark, I think that kind of like you, that going in, that was one of the things I anticipated about Love and Thunder was that, okay, well, we're going to get, this is essentially the sequel to Ragnarok. I actually saw it more as the second Waititi Thor movie more than I saw it as the fourth Thor movie, if that makes sense. Because it just seemed like the before and after, Ragnarok just completely restarted the whole thing for me. But so quick take then, Mark. What did you think?
On the new one, I liked it. I mean, I think maybe because the expectations were fairly high from Ragnarok, and it was just a lot of the same for me. It maybe wasn't quite as good, but it still was very fun theater experience,
Mhm.
enjoyable. There was a funny kind of a running gag the whole time that was probably as funny as anything in Ragnarok, and it was the goats.
The
I don't know
goats.
if
I
you
was
wanna
going to
give that
say,
away.
yeah, which I didn't realize at the time until I read about it afterwards, is actually tied into mythology. Like those characters.
Oh,
Yeah. So, well, maybe I should just do the brief setup. I mean, so
Sure.
clearly we're talking about this is the aftermath of Endgame. At the end of Endgame, Thor teams up with the Guardians of the Galaxy. They take off on adventures, and we kind of get the anticipated idea that Thor and Star Lord are kind of going to have this alpha male, kind of conflict. We don't actually see that, unfortunately, which is probably one of the things that's a letdown of the movie, because we skip ahead a few years and Thor's back in shape, and he's really just kind of, saving the Guardians whenever they find themselves in a tight spot, because he's Thor and he can just kind of come in and just wipe the floor with whatever potential interstellar bad guy they're dealing with. But Love and Thunder kicks off when by introducing this new bad guy, Christian Bale's Gore, the God Butcher, who's, his title's fairly self-explanatory. And so Thor has to take on Gore, not with the Guardians of the Galaxy, but he goes and he gets Valkyrie, he gets Korg, and they all team up to take on the new bad guy, which is really pretty simple. I mean, there's a kind of a subplot about how Gore has kidnapped the Asgardian kids, and they all have to go and get different weapons, which is something I'm going to talk more about in a second. But effectively, the real kind of drama is built around the idea that when Thor goes back to kind of recruit all of his old friends, he discovers that his old flame, Jane, has now turned into a superhero herself, because she got a hold of his hammer, and that hammer turned her into the mighty Thor. So like basically a female version of Thor. So that's, kind of and then being with Taika Waititi, it's kind of this silly, awkward, almost rom-com type of chemistry style. And so that I think is kind of one of the, I don't even know if I'd call it I guess it's technically a subplot, right? Because the main plot is them confronting Gore, the God Butcher, and all this kind of stuff. But the Thor and Jane / Mighty Thor thing is a pretty strong component of this one.
mhm.
As is the soundtrack, which is full of Guns N' Roses this time around.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
lots of craziness, including a couple of really loud goats that
They scream like humans.
yes, they do.
And for some
Yes, they
reason, it's
do.
always funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
Is
So
it funny every time?
it really is. I don't know if it'd be funny
yeah.
the second time I watch it, but it was
Well,
funny every time.
because they spread it out. I mean, basically the goats are pulling some kind of interstellar boat ship thing, and so that's
Mhm.
why we see them pretty frequently, as they're
Oh, okay. They're their
they're
transportation kind of.
right,
Yeah.
right. And those clips are spaced out enough that, at least for me, like you say, Mark, the first time, the screams happen infrequently enough that they're still a surprise and is this
Yeah.
funny thing. And who knows if it'll 4 or 5 viewings
Hold
in,
up.
if it'll still be carrying the same weight, but who knows. But no,
enough.
I kind of had the same reaction, where it wasn't as good as Ragnarok. I didn't like it as much. I liked a lot of individual components of Love and Thunder a lot more than I liked the total movie. That's kind of
Mhm.
what stood out to me, was that there were certain sequences, one especially that I kind of have to talk around it because I don't want to spoil it, but there's a third act moment that involves more than Thor and Gore, that is kind of just a really fun, uh, unexpected kind of twist in the final battle that I just is a really classic example of kind of how Waititi can take something that is dramatic and action heavy, but also make it kind of fun and silly and crazy at the same time. Mark, I don't even know if you know what I'm referring to at this point, because I'm
think
talking
I
around it so
might.
much. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, and so there were individual bits, but I also didn't feel like things gelled nearly as well as with Ragnarok, because even though there was a comparatively serious, story with Ragnarok, all of the silliness blended and wove in consistently. Whereas with Love and Thunder, I felt like the clash between the over the top humor and the seriousness, especially of the Gore character, because I mean his whole motivation is that his daughter dies. So this is a really serious thing. It was just very jarring. And so I felt like things just didn't mesh quite the same way. And especially that juxtaposition of the humor against the serious tone and moments didn't work nearly as well. And so altogether, I still like Love and Thunder more than 90% of what I saw post Endgame. But I still wouldn't rate it at the same level as Ragnarok or a lot of the other best MCU stuff.
I agree with the tone part of it, because and the weird thing is, for me, I think it's a slightly different complaint. There's times where I think that we're seeing the awkward interaction, almost the rom-com awkwardness you get when a lover, has been maybe jilted by another lover, and then they reconnect through, weird circumstances. And they tried to milk that more than actually they got out of it for me. Like, maybe your mileage may vary, but for me, it was just kind of like, we get the joke, and we get that, Thor is the one that's been keeping track, and Jane is not quite as, love struck as Thor. And Thor has maybe had a little bit of a harder time than he thought getting over her. And they milk that a little more than I think it works for me. And there's also this little awkwardness, and maybe it's part of Jane's character changing too. And the weird thing is, I think Natalie Portman is like a really, really great actress, but
Agreed.
she's not as strong comically or comedically as people in this movie, and it kind of showed. But I think she did what Taika, tried to do, what Taika asked her to do. And also her character is not quite as funny, because there's a little bit of a tragic backstory in it that is truly tragic that she's dealing with. But for that, it didn't work quite as well with me. So a lot of the humor was not so much between them as just other things in the movie. One thing, though, I really liked about Gore. So, for example, you have certain villains in Marvel movies that are just like, they're out to just destroy all of civilization and take over the world, right? Like they have a lust for power that's just unmatched, and therefore all the Avengers need to team up and try to beat that person, such as Thanos. And his motivation for becoming a god butcher, it actually is very relatable to everyone watching the movie. And also to somebody who just had a daughter, 2 weeks ago. It's like his daughter is killed, and he is finally kind of fed up with, and this just right at the beginning. I mean, the movie, I'll try not to spoil it, but the movie actually starts with Gore. It doesn't even start with Thor, it's with Gore. And then there's even a little bit of an ending involving him that I think is pretty key. And so I liked this story, and also Christian Bale just killed it in terms of the acting. Like a little bit of campy, but not like, you kind of wonder, he's probably had to hear for 14 years how Heath Ledger was the movie, was The Dark Knight, and really the whole trilogy in some ways. And it's always said, you hear about actors that would like to play villains because they're usually the most interesting characters. And I think Gore is quite interesting. When I first read about this movie, I actually thought it was just going to be like a boring, angry guy in makeup that you kind of have to see every 20 or 30 minutes. And he turned out to be a quite interesting character that you sort of looked forward to seeing in the movie. I mean, there's some pretty genuinely chilling, scary parts with him, but
and I think that's what kind of undercuts the movie, is because I remember watching his, because there's no big spoiler here because it's the beginning of the movie. He's out in the desert, and he's trying to keep his daughter alive, and it's this really, really serious thing. And you're thinking, wow, this doesn't feel like, Ragnarok. It doesn't feel like a Taika Waititi thing. And so, and because Christian Bale is such an intense, just, no holds barred, method actor type. I mean, the juxtaposition of him really going after it versus, the screaming goats, it just doesn't mesh the way that other similar movies and efforts have. And so that's why I say, like, because I loved compared to most MCU villains, just like you say, there's some weight here. It's not just some megalomaniacal, I want power. It's I want revenge, right?
Yeah.
And that's some of the best movie villains. I'm thinking of Khan, right? Like Khan was driven by revenge, and that was what propelled him in a way that was more believable and relatable and compelling. And so I don't know. I hate to say it, but because I noticed that with some of these movies, I have my initial reaction when I first walk out of the theater. And then as a few days go by, sometimes I find myself like wanting to go back more and more.
Yeah.
Or getting less and less interested. And with Love and Thunder, I mean, I still liked it. I would still give it a overall positive review. And because in spite of its weaknesses, I still enjoy it. Like you said, it's still very entertaining. It's fun. It's definitely kind of your popcorn chewing, kind of crazy over the top movie. But the weaknesses tend to float to the surface a little bit more as time goes on instead of the strengths.
Yeah, that's probably true. I think I remember when you talked about Doctor Strange too, how you found yourself caring less. I mean, you were not caring about it by the end of the movie.
Yeah, oh yeah, that was.
But then after the movie was over, you just didn't care. And so sometimes the mark of a great movie to me, or mediocre to me, is how much do I even think about the movie after I'm done watching it? Mm-hmm. Was it just 2 hours of escapism, or is it something I just can't stop thinking about? And I agree. I don't really think about Love and Thunder. It's not it's not really a super great movie. It was a fun entertainment and not quite as good as Ragnarok. I mean, there really were some wonderful scenes in it. There was a scene where there's a lot of fighting going on between the main characters on sort of a black and white moon-like planet. Do you remember that? And the use of color, where there's sort of those flashes of blue or yellow, are really effective, really cool looking. And a little bit of horror, I guess it looks like, again, but I mostly, and then there's kind of a scene with a lot of gods, and Zeus with just an inexplicable accent, but it's also kind of funny.
Well, right, because and here this is one of the things I wanted to touch on too, right? Oh, okay. Was that one of the big themes and kind of one of the comic subplots is that and I don't even want to try to pronounce it because I know I'm going to screw it up and sound like an idiot. So Thor's hammer is now with Jane, and Stormbreaker, the axe, is with Thor. But Thor is kind of yearning and having like pangs of of whatever for his old hammer,
longing for Mjolnir.
So it's like this love triangle, and everybody's got to have a weapon. Like even Gore has like the necro sword or something, and so they have to go to first they go to Zeus because they want to recruit his help because it's the God Butcher. So hey, maybe Zeus would be interested in stopping this guy, right?
Right.
And there's this crazy scene, and Russell Crowe plays Zeus, and there's all the people in the hall. But the main focus is, okay, we've got to get Zeus's thunderbolt or lightning bolt or whatever. And there's so much focus on weapons. And I get it because, they're fun. But I thought that one of the main points of Ragnarok was Thor doesn't need a weapon. Like the whole lesson was, Thor, you are not the god of hammers. You are the god of thunder. Right. And so even though they're cool, yeah, I get it. And maybe he had to come up with a special weapon to beat Thanos. Right. There's still kind of this. So does that not mean anything, right? I mean, does Thor really have to have the?
No, that's the thing. Nothing means anything anymore. And everything is being undermined. And everything I've heard about this.
Run with it, Danny. Let's hear it.
Here comes the nihilist.
Here we go.
But everything I hear about it just makes me think this is so stupid. And like how, these directors and writers are going back on their own works, which I just think is so absurd.
Sorry, Danny, I'm going to cut you off, and then I want you to take off again,
please,
because I think it's important to note that when you say it doesn't mean anything, this is not coming from somebody who hates all Marvel movies and all MCU stuff. because you pointed out before that you really liked Ragnarok.
No, it's
And-
that nothing means anything anymore
Yeah,
since like 2020, like with the TV
right.
show.
Because I think that if it was just somebody who is not into comic book movies or superhero movies, it'd be okay. Well, nothing's going to please you.
Well,
But
it's
I
all
think-
pointless. It's
But
all
I
just
think you're in a
entertainment.
position
Yeah.
where you
Yeah.
did really like this stuff, and you have really
Yes.
liked this stuff, and now so okay. So keep on going.
No, and I did enjoy Ragnarok at first. Since then, I've grown to like it a little less because I feel like it was kind of hinting at dark things to come with poor story writing and poor
those kind of
characters.
things to come.
Yeah. No, so like and I don't know if you want to address this at all, Josh. We can totally cut this out. I thought there were some interesting comments on your review. If you wanted to
Oh, the comments on my review.
for Ragnarok. Not
Like-
Ragnarok, for Love and Thunder
Yeah.
on Facebook.
You mean the ones that disagreed with me, or the ones that?
Yeah, no, there were a lot that disagreed with you. Because it's just like
Well, they're all wrong.
they're all
Can I-
wrong.
That's my
So
rebuttal.
would you
You're
hold
wrong.
that 3 out of 4 stars still? I was so surprised to see that.
That I gave it 3 out of 4.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like I say, it's kind of one of those deals. So this is going to, I am coming around to answer the question
Yeah,
just in
for
a
sure.
slightly roundabout way.
You're just avoiding it.
One of the
what it
things I remember about Last Jedi
Uh-huh.
was that there were 2 specific moments that I absolutely loved that just felt like these are the kind of moments that make Star Wars movies so much fun.
Mhm.
And such a, and because of that, that really kind of drove me to kind of say, you know what, for all the other stuff, this is a fun movie. This is a worthwhile movie because there's this great scene. There's this great battle scene with the red guards,
Oh, yeah.
and then I just loved I'll just call it the Holdo maneuver because, that way, what I'm talking about, but it doesn't spoil it for anybody who still hasn't seen Last Jedi. I just thought those moments were just fantastic. And I thought that they kind of carried the film. With Love and Thunder, this thing I'm talking about that kind of happens in the 3rd act that involves a lot of people who are not demigods. Let's just put it that way. Like that. And then some of the humor, like there are individual elements that I thought were really, really good. And whereas a few years ago where I felt like they were good enough to call Last Jedi like a 3.5 star movie, now, being a few years older and wiser and more jaded, I'm thinking, okay, well, I think I would still give it 3 out of 4. I wouldn't go 3.5 out of 4. I think I'd go 3 out of 4. But there are enough hesitations and reservations that I don't know that I would go all the way down to 2.5, because usually my 2.5 is reserved for movies that I really didn't like, but I didn't feel like I could just completely bash. And that wasn't Love and Thunder. There are definitely things I didn't like about Love and Thunder. But that's where I landed on 3,
Okay.
because I think it's good enough to, I mean,
It's good enough to recommend because
I-
you're kind of in that position
well,
of recommending it.
the question that I was kind of asking myself towards the end of the movie was, like Ragnarok, is this something I'm going to buy for my own collection? And I'm not sure. I still really, I love Taika Waititi. He's just one of my favorite directors. I really love what he's done overall with Thor. And so there's kind of an instinct to say, okay, yeah, no, I think this would be part of the collection. But this one, I don't know, is not quite good enough. And so that's why, like, I absolutely think that I will rewatch it at some point when it's on Disney Plus. I don't think I'm going to go out and see it in the theater again.
Okay.
But so I can really see the criticisms and the compliments at the same time. And what's interesting is usually is the case is, you kind of go through the Rotten Tomatoes reviews, and whether they give it a negative or a positive review, they're still all saying the same thing, which is, that's kind of where the subjectivity kicks in, is that, okay,
Yeah.
well, I thought that this and this and this was weak, therefore I hated this movie, or yeah, this and this and this was weak, but I still really enjoyed it. And and so I guess I recognize and felt frustrated by a lot of the shortcomings, but still enjoyed it enough to lean slightly in the positive direction.
Okay.
But
No,
then,
that's
and then of
fair.
course, everybody who disagrees with me is just wrong.
You know, it's
No,
funny.
I
just
strongly disagree, but no, it's just like
No, my friend,
and I do
I
think-
had one friend who I think he posted like a 1,000 word response on my post, and he had some really good points, and because he felt like Love and Thunder was better than Ragnarok, and while I definitely recognize the shortcomings that he pointed out, I definitely disagree. I think Ragnarok was a lot better, but
it could just be that he's a huge Guns N' Roses fan, because even
that could be
Ragnarok,
it.
I think it had one Led Zeppelin song, the Immigrant Song, and
Yeah.
there was at least,
But
I counted
used
at
so
least
well.
3 Guns N' Roses. Oh, they were used perfectly. The slow motion, like jumping through the air and landing on the, I mean, they did it the same thing kind of in Love
Right.
and Thunder,
But
But,
okay,
but
counted
Mark,
at
you have
least
to
so here's my
understand
thought,
that
though.
it takes 3 Guns N' Roses songs to be equivalent to
equal
one
a Led Zeppelin.
Led Zeppelin song.
That's the math there. Everything's balanced now. No,
Yeah.
well, my thought with that, with like the music and the visuals, then, like, how would this be any different than just like a narrative music video where it's like, oh, we got some flashy stuff, we're enjoying, like, it's that sensory overload.
Mhm.
But it's like you come to a movie to experience a story, and especially with Marvel movies, and this is why I'm like, I'm done with this, because they're not even trying anymore.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm like, I'm not buying
I-
into this, because when it comes to a movie, especially in a connected universe, you want it to be a continuous story that is
Yeah.
actually like, it means something. That's why I'm saying it doesn't mean anything, because like, okay, like every element they introduce kind of undermines Endgame. Like, I've loved all the people who are poking holes where it's like, hey, if we have this thing, why didn't they have it in Endgame? Or like with Wanda's
Yeah.
BS powers in Doctor Strange, it's like, where was that when we needed that? Like, it's just everything they're adding to it. They're not thinking about it. They're not building on what was already established, which we love. We love what was established. Why would you wreck that?
I would
I know
And
how-
have to
unless I'm
disagree.
wrong, like, we didn't really have that issue prior to Endgame, right? I mean, I didn't find
Okay.
myself asking. I mean, now granted, like when I watched
There
Civil
were
War,
holes.
yeah,
There were
well, I
gonna
mean,
be
you watch
problems,
Civil
yeah.
War and you think, okay, well, this doesn't make any sense when all these guys are fighting each other, because like 2 of them are, Vision and Wanda are like these limitless power characters, and then you have Hawkeye. Poor Hawkeye, right? I
know, poor guy.
I love what they did with him in
Saturday Night Live.
No, what? No, in
There's
Ultron.
a whole skit on that.
Is
What
there?
you're saying, there's a whole skit in SNL about how all the Avengers have these powers, and they're like, "What do you do?" And he's like, "Yeah, I just shoot this arrow. I just shoot this bow and arrow." It's like, that's all. And it's like, yep. And everyone else has these amazing, actual
Yeah.
superpowers, and he's really good at shooting a bow and arrow.
Right.
Like they had Jason Sudeikis playing Hulk, and I mean, they did a whole SNL thing on that.
Okay.
And
I am
Jeremy Renner
so,
was in it. Jeremy
so
Renner was
glad.
Hawkeye.
I'm so glad you said that about SNL, because like my favorite response to Love and Thunder has just been like, Thor's character is basically the character he's played in like sketches and ads or something like that, like as a parody of himself, where this movie is just like a parody, and they're sacrificing like actual emotional weight and good emotional beats. Like, there's a lot of potential in these plot lines, but it just exists for the joke. Like, everything's just a joke.
See, I thought that I kind of was having that problem too, because I'm like, is Taika Waititi is his whole goal now just to try to be funny? And because he can,
well, he's trying to capture what he was able to get naturally before.
But where I would have to disagree with you is, I know that you like narrative, you really seek story, and you also want people to have learn a lesson, have a redemptive
So demanding.
arc. Right? No, that's fine.
So
That's
demanding.
what you need out of a movie. Like,
Oh,
you want to
I'm
have a redemptive
sorry. I'm
story
so
arc.
traditionalist. with
No,
this.
what I'm saying is, you get that. If you would watch this movie, because I don't want to spoil it for you.
Yeah.
And it's unusual. There's an unexpected thing that happens that I did not see coming at all. And it involves something happening that is, I think, a perfect ending to happen to this particular character. And because Thor, what he's doing, and he kind of starts out the movie, and the funny thing is, the movie is sort of told by his friend Korg, who is played by Taika Waititi.
Oh no, I know.
Yeah.
Like narrating the
I know
story.
this movie from like beginning to end. I've seen like so many.
You've seen enough of it, you know
Yeah,
it. So
no,
you know the ending?
Yes.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
that's what I'm saying. Like, I know all I want to know because, like, I was so nervous about this episode because I'm like, I want to trash this movie so hard, but I haven't seen it, so like, I don't have any credibility.
Well, I like the story. I like what happens because it does to me have weight. It does have emotional weight, and I think it's earned.
But isn't it
So
undermined by like, I don't know. They're just
No, and
I
that's
don't
what I'm
know.
saying. Is that now? Well, sorry, Danny. I don't know if this is what you're referring to, but
Yeah.
the way that the humor doesn't match up against the more serious emotional weight, that's
Yeah.
much more jarring. And
Yeah.
I realized that this might be a stretch as far as a comparison, but I did find myself thinking, okay, now is the problem that Taika Waititi just can't handle serious material? But that's obviously
Which
a
he
no,
totally can.
because
Yeah.
Jojo Rabbit is this amazing example of his quirky, deadpan humor matched against this amazing, emotional, moving, beautiful story. And so I don't know. I can't definitively point my finger and say this is what happened, but it does seem like in this movie, he's just more interested in taking the piss out of superhero movies and just kind of making fun of because it almost, like I said, it really feels sometimes like he's just trying to give all of us a breath of fresh air from the pomposity and grandeur of the superhero genre. And then Taika Waititi comes along and turns Thor, the great demigod, into a himbo, right?
yeah.
And so
Well,
maybe
some
it
of
just
them,
took
yeah.
it too far, or
Yeah.
Some of them,
it was a fun joke for one movie, but I don't know.
they just take him so seriously that like there's got to be a good balance, because like even like Thor: The Dark World is just such a completely different tone than these last two Thor movies. And like the one thing that the DCU has been criticized of is being too dark and heavy and serious and maybe not having enough humor in theirs.
Yeah.
And maybe it's why I just loved Ragnarok so much, and I like Thor, Love and Thunder. I do think Taika does have the ability to do it. I mean, it's so funny because his movies in some ways are like his interviews. If you've ever seen him interviewed, he can't stop cracking jokes. Like even when you feel like the interviewer wants a serious answer, because I watched him, like even when he won his Oscar, he won the Oscar for the screenplay, for the adapted screenplay for Jojo Rabbit.
Yeah.
And they always have these little press, interviews right immediately after, and they're asking questions, and he just keeps cracking jokes, like he's not just like some people when they win, they're talking about how grateful they are and everyone's so good and it's such a wonderful night. And he gives interviews where he's being interviewed about like, what we do in the shadows or whatever. And he almost just can't be serious for more than like 30 seconds. I mean, it's just funny. And so, his movies are kind of like that.
He does show that he can. And like,
exactly,
it's having those moments. And that's why I think Ragnarok was so strong, is because like, what was her name? The sister Hela or whatever.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Like she scared me, and like, because you had these moments where it's like, oh snap, the hammer's like destroyed, but Thor's not going like, oh my baby, and then audience laughs. We don't have a laugh track moment there because it's like, because I think Taika is good at like, hey, pause, this is emotional. My favorite scene in Jojo Rabbit is, I think it's a single take where it's like you're following Jojo, it's near the end, but it's like as war is going on all around him, and you're watching him react to these awful things.
Yeah.
No jokes, and so I don't know. It makes me really frustrated when it's like, oh, people liked the funny stuff, but the funny stuff was great because it had all these other elements too, to make it all balanced.
Well, and it was more seamless. It didn't.
Yeah.
With Love and Thunder, I feel like they were alternating between serious
Like
moment,
flipping a
joke,
switch, kinda.
serious moment, joke, back and forth. With Ragnarok, the seriousness was kind of muted and the humor was kind of amplified, but it all just kind of flowed, right? Where I didn't feel like they were just kind of trading off and that's why I say like Love and Thunder just feels very, very uneven and kind of clunky. And
Okay,
that's
maybe
why I
it
say
was
like I
just,
like
like, my-
parts. Yeah.
Okay, it might have been my misinterpretation and like something that I heard, but there was like one particular scene where like something bad happened to someone and they're like, oh, and they start making jokes about this. I'm like, how dare they? Like, it made me
Yeah.
so mad that was
Well-
happening, where it almost seemed like it was overlapping instead of like a switch, but like maybe it was kind of like this was that and that was that.
So here's
I
a
haven't
question.
seen it. I don't know. See, this is a
Jojo-
great way. It's not just like
Jojo
releasing my
Rabbit.
credibility. It's like, oh, sorry, my bad.
So Jojo Rabbit was the best movie of 2019. I think we all can agree on that.
For sure.
And
Mhm.
Ragnarok was a much better than average, hilarious superhero movie. And now we have Love and Thunder. What's Taika Waititi going to do with Star Wars?
Is he doing a Star Wars movie?
Yeah.
Yes.
He directed the last episode, the finale of The Mandalorian. He was the voice, and he does a lot of voice and actor work, more than
Oh,
people
yeah.
realize.
Yeah.
Which I
of
love. Every time I
IG-11,
hear
the
his voice,
droid.
it makes me happy.
He's doing a Star Wars movie. He's still apparently working on the story. He's expanding the universe, and I think there are a lot of people out there that are like nervous, maybe excited. I don't know what the word is.
Why-
Because it's so
Why would
It
different.
might
be
not
nervous?
be bad. It might not be bad. I just heard the funniest thing about this, and this is the only exposure I have to this. I don't know if you guys saw the article or not, but like apparently Taika approached Natalie Portman wanting her to come into this show without realizing she was already
That she
a
was
very
already-
prominent character in the universe. So like that
Oh, yeah.
made me so nervous. And I think that might be why people are kind of nervous. And this is like, that's the kind of thing that I've been feeling with all this. I'm like, no one cares about the existing stuff because it's just all so disrespectful. Like,
Which is my big complaint about Kenobi, but that's another subject.
okay, so here's the thing. I might have a lot of feelings about Love and Thunder. I have way more feelings about Kenobi, which I also haven't seen.
You gotta see some of this stuff.
Not these. Disney
Not-
is not getting my money until they start making something good. It's gonna be me alone that saves everything.
Well, I mean, Kenobi. You're saying you did watch or you didn't watch Kenobi?
Oh no.
Any
Oh,
of them?
No. Mm-mm.
Oh,
So
my.
why, in as concise a way as possible, sum up your feeling, your argument for boycotting Kenobi.
So when it comes to movies, I think movies are different than the TV show releases on Disney Plus, because all I see with the releases on Disney Plus is we're trying to crank out as many things as possible. I don't know if you've seen the full lineup that they have for Marvel and for Star Wars for the next, it was only like 2 years, but
Okay.
it was like just massive catalog of new content. And it's like, I think they're just trying to keep up subscriber count because it's like, oh, you don't want to like cancel your subscription because we're going to have this new thing from this thing you like.
Okay.
And because everything's coming out so fast, again, no thoughts coming into it. It's contradicting so much that has happened, ruining what's to come, and it's just, and the quality is so bad, especially with TV shows. At least with like Thor, there's going to be a huge budget behind it because it's a theatrical release.
Uh-huh.
Whereas with Kenobi, like, the lightsaber scenes aren't as cool. The chase scenes are kind of pathetic. Like there's just, it really lacks in quality. So
So
Yeah.
one of your primary objections is
Yes.
that it's a glut of content that is watered down in terms of quality and not paying attention to canon and previous. It's well, because to me it sounds like a reflection of what I object to as far as, well, so much of our kind of media right now is just the idea that you just have to just put everything out there. There has to be a constant stream of new content.
Yeah.
And yeah, because I have not seen the lists of what is to come with Marvel and Star Wars. I mean, I was under the impression, apparently, and I was way off, that after Solo struggled and Last Jedi was controversial and Rise of Skywalker was kind of disappointing, I kind of thought that Disney was gonna step away from the constant flow of new Star Wars content
But the Mandalorian kicked off.
Yeah. Well, and maybe that's what reversed is because since Mandalorian was good,
Mhm.
they've kind of justified continuing with other stuff. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, they had a very aggressive release schedule.
Yeah.
And I think what really happened was Solo didn't do very well and was like the worst as far as the box office goes, the
Yeah.
worst
Well,
Star Wars
they
movie
rushed the
ever.
release. They rushed the release.
Right.
It was like
And
6 months after Last Jedi. And
yeah, well, they
Was
were
it
just taking
really?
advantage, and you know,
Dang.
and the thing is, I'm one of the few, I guess, alive that liked Solo. I didn't think it was horrible.
You know, to
oh,
be
I did
fair,
fine.
to be
It's a
fair,
middle
I
of the road
actually
Star Wars movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it
okay.
was
So I
fun.
watched Solo for the first time last night, and
Oh.
it was like actually really good. Like I was surprised.
Yeah,
No, it's not a bad movie. I distinctly
Yeah.
remember walking out of that movie thinking, this is a
It was
middle of the
fine.
road Star Wars movie. This
Right.
is not, one of the ones that I think is bad. It's far from my favorite, but it's perfectly good. I wouldn't mind watching it again, not necessarily in the theater, but like, just watching it on streaming or on Blu-ray or whatever. But yeah, no, it's good. I mean, I enjoyed it. There were definitely considering, I guess, and this is faint praise, but considering what they could have messed up with it, I thought it came out quite well.
Like
Like-
with
Mhm.
Kenobi.
Well, yeah,
No, exactly. I was bracing myself watching it, but then it was like, oh, it's respectful and it doesn't make Han look absolutely awful. What is this?
yeah,
Like,
no, and
it's just a whole other era of media.
and I think that they tripped up with Kenobi on that.
Oh yeah.
Where
You know what I wanted with Kenobi? I wanted like Book of Eli, just brooding old man, kind of like in the desert with his, mysterious kind of journey and like, maybe things happen along the way. But like I really wanted that kind of aesthetic and experience with the parallel story of
well, maybe it's
Darth
there.
Vader.
You got to go watch it.
no, it's not.
Wait,
I know
you're,
what
you're
happens.
criticizing Kenobi, but you haven't seen it?
Oh, no, here's the thing. I've watched so many breakdowns. Again, the same thing with
Not the same thing.
Thor, where it's like, here's plot point for plot point, exactly what happens, and it's stupid.
Well, then you might as well watch it.
No,
If you're going to
because
dig
it's
into
the
that much.
principle. It's the subscriber count, because the reason they're generating all this content is because the views are still there, and they're like, oh, hey, people are still watching this garbage. Let's make some more. On principle,
man.
I can't do it. I
Well,
won't.
I didn't think Kenobi was as good as The Mandalorian.
No.
And I thought that one thing that was kind of weird about it to me is you introduce all these major characters that you get in the later Star Wars movies, right? New Hope and on. And so there's a little bit of a lack of tension because they're all going to survive and not get
Yep.
seriously hurt, right?
Right.
And so when they introduce a character that you don't know, you're like, uh-oh, might not be around for the end, and then I don't know, there's this like fifth brother, third sister, second cousin, like
Yeah.
do you remember all the kind of like Darth Vader lackeys that have these
Right.
they call each other by these names? And I don't understand the whole Star Wars genealogy or the canon.
Well, yeah, because I think these characters are used elsewhere in some of the
Okay.
animated series, and
They must
which
be.
okay, fine. And
Mhm.
again, I mean, I think that's problematic because just like with Marvel, you create this situation where if you haven't seen all this stuff, which is increasingly obscure,
Mhm.
I mean, I really
And
don't
really
think.
time consuming. It's a lot.
Well, I honestly,
At least they
as
were
I-
reasonably episodes that were 45, 50 minutes or whatever. I mean,
But not if you're having to do hours
Stranger
of like
Things.
Clone Wars and Rebels and
Well,
Yeah.
that's what I mean. Is that
Yeah.
I have a tough time justifying the idea that I mean, yeah, I get that. Oh well, this is going to be kind of a bonus for the fans of this show or this comic and stuff. But it's like, I have always just seen the movies as that's it. Like anything beyond that, I don't care. I'm not investing, and now granted, I mean, I have really enjoyed Mandalorian. And so,
yeah.
but that seems like it's a little bit more official, but like all of these peripheral references to characters that are going to come up in video games. I'm sorry. I'm just not, you're losing me on this. And I think, just to kind of bring it back around, I think that Vader's lackeys were characters from some of these other peripheral, projects. And I don't know, maybe they're more interesting characters in those other projects because they weren't in Kenobi.
I'll tell you
Yeah.
one thing, and this actually might be my other big reason why I don't care for this at all, because like it's getting to the point where again it's kind of actually disrespectful. So those who really do know the shows and like the comics or books or whatever are actually like getting really upset with these new things because they're ripping off things or they're like disrespecting it, where it's like and now we're seeing it with movies where it's like, wow, they really butchered Obi-Wan, who's like one of the coolest characters, right?
Yeah.
So the thing for me is like Reva's like a big problem, and like I hate how they've been like deflecting things where it's like, oh, it's racism. No, that's not what it is. It's
so
that,
the main non-Darth Vader bad guy in
Yes.
Kenobi is her. So her name is Reva, but she's referred to as
Third
something sister,
Third
third
sister.
sister. Yeah.
And
yeah.
she
Yeah.
wants to be the Grand Inquisitor. She's trying to
Right.
get promoted.
No,
Yeah.
her character has seemed to be the focal point of a lot of the blowback on the series.
well, because
It's
her
weird.
character ended up being the focal point of this series called Kenobi.
Ah.
And the problem is that this her whole story is a straight ripoff of the Fallen Order, which my husband and I played. Great video game, really great storyline. But you're following this Jedi who's like slowly gaining powers again, which makes sense in a video game because as a player, you're supposed to like be learning
Power
these
up.
skills. So they have to reflect that narratively. But to do that with Kenobi doesn't make sense. And then the main antagonist in it is woman of color who was a youngling, super jaded against the Jedi because she was abandoned by them. And like it makes sense, and she actually like comes face to face with her master again, and like it's really emotional and it's really gripping, but like it made sense. Whereas with Reva, like I've just heard all these things, it's like, where are the motivations? Like, is she conflicted? It's just so confusing. Whereas like in a video game,
I think she
it was
is
so tightly packaged.
Yeah. I mean, she was conflicted. If you watch the series, and the very opening scene is, I think it was Order 66 or something. It was some order that was given to
Yeah.
destroy all the
Yeah,
up and
right.
coming Jedi, the younglings,
Yeah.
and she was there. And so, there's a scene where Kenobi kind of figures it out and uses that to, well, not manipulate, but to help her come around if possible.
But
Against
this is
Darth Vader.
after. This is after she's so upset about these children being killed that she's going after and killing people and killing
Right.
torturing
No, and that's
children.
kind of the thing that doesn't make sense about her characters is
Well-
if her real motivation is to, be this clandestine, revenge agent thing, it doesn't make sense that she's going along with the program and doing all these evil things while she's biding her time and waiting for her moment. I think that's the complaint that I've heard, is that if she really is kind of a good guy in disguise or has pure motivations, then how does it make sense that she's also out doing the work of the evil, of the dark
Okay.
side, and the Empire?
and
So
pushing
maybe
the
I'll-
envelope. She's the one who wants it to be further. It's not like she's just obeying orders. She is super antagonistic.
So maybe I'll be the Star Wars apologist here, since it sounds like we need one.
Fair enough. Let's do it.
So maybe she didn't actually have those motivations. Maybe Kenobi helped unlock those in her. They were deep, latent, like
Okay.
within her. Not necessarily ulterior motives, but she didn't really fully understand. She just has bred to be what she's going to be with Darth Vader. But when Kenobi talks to her, she starts realizing maybe that's maybe this is something that I should be doing. And now I don't know, maybe
her
But she
character
does-
arc is supposed to be an echo of Anakin's.
Maybe. But she does reveal that like everything, she has known so much all along, and this is all just a part of her big plan to get close to Vader. Like, wasn't that?
that could be. I don't remember exactly.
But it wasn't set up. It wasn't set up. But
Yeah.
but they want you to think that because then they want you to cheer for her.
One of the complaints I had is, so I had read online a lot of complaints that she was her acting was just not good.
Mhm.
I don't know so much about the
And I
character
can't
motivation,
say
but her
anything
acting was
about
not
that.
good.
Yeah.
And so I was prepared for that. And when I watched it, I thought, oh, it wasn't really that bad. She wasn't given a lot of great lines. She was
Yeah.
given some lines that sounded like they were written by a seventh grader trying to do Star Wars, maybe. But like, I thought the child actor, the one that played Leia, was not very good. I know that's really mean because it's like probably a little 10-year-old girl, but
Yeah.
I've seen plenty of
Yeah.
great child actors in movies and TV shows that were extremely convincing, and I just didn't feel that
No,
from
and this
Princess
is this
Leia.
is where this is where I see, you know, Disney has a way of kind of showing its hand with its properties, because with a lot of the Star Wars content, it just, I mean, that's one of the things I always have to give them credit for with Force Awakens is that felt like a Star Wars movie again. It felt like the movies that I saw when I was a kid. Now, on the flip side, there are moments like when little 10-year-old Leia is getting chased through the woods by a bunch of kidnapper bounty hunter types that you realize, yep, Disney made this because it's betraying its little kid bias, and there's no reason to have a 10-year-old actress with that much screen time and that much dialogue, and it just, that kind of struck me as kind of a Disney giveaway. It's like, oh yeah, this is made by Disney, and they're going to think, oh, isn't it cute? We're going to have this little girl, and she's wisecracking just like Princess Leia when she grows up, and yeah, because I wasn't a fan of that either. I mean, you can't blame the kid because she's a kid, but I do blame whoever was in charge and saying, we're going to put this much weight and dialogue and performance on this little 10-year-old actress. And that's why I say I think it's because it's a Disney production, not because it's actually good for the story.
That's so interesting you say it that way, because like the criticism that I've heard was that it was just like, oh, it was for like feminism purposes and we need to give more attention to Leia than to Luke, or something like that.
No, and
But
I think that's a legitimate point too.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
I think it's interesting because I hadn't considered that like it could just be like this is to cater to children and like to show that it is Disney. I hadn't thought about that at all. Like,
no, I think that this, and honestly, this for me, this stretches back way before Disney took over. But I think that there has been a, maybe even since, you could argue since Return of the Jedi, there's been kind of this misunderstanding of what makes Star Wars appeal to kids. And, I can say this with authority because I was a little kid watching
you were
these
one
movies.
Of those kids.
And I did not relate to Star Wars because I saw little kids my age playing characters. I related to Star Wars because I aspired to be like Han Solo and I aspired to be like Luke Skywalker. I didn't need to have somebody my age making witty, sarcastic remarks or having fart jokes and the kind of stuff that I would, exchange, the kind of jokes that I would tell my other friends in third grade. Right. And that's why I say, like, from Return of the Jedi on, there's kind of this mistaken understanding that, if you want to do this for kids, then you actually have to put kids in it and make it kid content, and so, but, and
well,
so I think that that's
with
exacerbated by Disney, but not necessarily originating with Disney.
But I do think that
Yeah,
people would want to hear what happens to Leia. Like, I mean, you have a series that takes place at the time period it does with Kenobi, and you get Ewan McGregor, which is great. I think a huge get, to the guy that was kind of in all the prequels. And so I think you at least have to include something with Leia and or Luke. Because
Maybe
they're two of the most interesting characters in the whole Star Wars canon.
Yeah,
right?
no, you could
You could
totally
have just gotten
have
better
them.
actors, and maybe they couldn't have been quite as for. I don't know. There's not as much.
No, but I think they could have been more peripheral. And honestly, as much as I love Darth Vader, as much as I really did enjoy a lot of aspects of that final episode, I don't understand why they had to force the issue with, we're going to make this all about Vader versus Obi-Wan, because anybody who's even kind of a casual, well-versed fan of these movies has always had the understanding from the first movie that when Obi-Wan and Vader meet up in the Death Star in the first movie, that's the first time they've seen each other since Vader became Vader. And
And now
this
it's the
whole thing
third
just kind
time.
of seemed now, yeah, it's
Yeah.
at least like the third time, so all the dialogue and this, I think that Danny, this is kind of the stuff that you're referring to, where it's like they just
Yeah.
kind of take what's already been done and just nuts to it. I think
Retcon.
we're just gonna,
Yeah.
and nobody will
Is-
notice, right?
Isn't
I mean,
that
we're
the
just
whole
Star Wars
complaint
fans.
of the Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker? The retconning and changing the backstory, and
Yep.
Yeah.
like you think that Rey really does have some important or royal, lineage, and then you find out apparently she's nothing, and then you find out, oh, it's Palpatine's granddaughter,
Well,
and Palpatine's alive.
And I think
controlling
what
everything.
really makes these things, because a lot of like those decisions on the surface didn't bother me that much.
Mhm.
What does bother me, and what seems much more apparent with, certainly kind of like the Disney era product, is that the behind the scenes intent and or agenda and or just especially with the sequel trilogy, the intent of the directors going back and forth from movie to movie is just so much more transparent, where you watch A New Hope and you watch Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and you don't watch that and think, oh, well, this is because so and so was the director of this one and he decided he wanted to do this other way. Whereas with these new movies, it's very clearly, okay, well, oh my gosh, forgot his name. Force Awakens, J.J. Abrams, right? So he's just kind of like bringing back the old Star Wars we know and love. He's got that vibe. And then Rian Johnson comes in and he's just going to change everything around, and we better get J.J. back. And he's gonna put all the stuff back in place that we've been griping about. And so that interplay just feels very transparent. And to me, it takes away from what I'm, because I'm not just enjoying what's on the screen. I'm also seeing very clearly what's playing out behind the camera, and it's a distraction and it takes me out of that world.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Totally.
But
agree.
anybody who disagreed with me on Love and Thunder is wrong. I'm just trolling my buddy.
But by the way, another thing that I thought was weird, sorry, I know we're almost done, but on Kenobi was like there's Liam Neeson appearance. Actually, I think there's a couple, and they didn't feel really necessary. Like they didn't feel like they added anything. It was just like, hey, let's see if we can get Liam Neeson to make an appearance. I wonder how much we can,
because
how
that's
much
exactly
it's
what
going to cost.
happened.
Yeah.
That was
Right?
it.
Like, and there's even kind of one at the end, and it doesn't lead to anything. I don't know. And I guess, is there going to be a second season? Do you know?
Kenobi?
Is there? Yeah,
Probably.
I don't know.
I mean,
Because there's still so much they can do with Luke. Because what I was kind of wondering is like, who is Ben Kenobi? Like, how does he kind of identify himself on Tatooine? Like, what is his Tatooine life like? And why does Luke have this relationship with him? Because Leia has no relationship with him.
And what happens to Obi-Wan in the next 10 years that ages him about
Mhm.
40 years?
Yeah, that was the other thing.
I
You
know,
look at
poor
Alec
Letty.
Guinness and you look at Ewan McGregor, it's like there's going to be
Little
something.
bit.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
always been a little bit of an issue, but
Oh,
maybe
so I
not
did
40, maybe
wanna-
not 40, maybe 25.
I did want to circle back to the comment you said with catering to the kids.
Yeah.
Because something that I had seen, and then this is why I didn't even consider that at all.
Those ungrateful
because-
kids, just so
No, it's just-
demanding.
It just looks like it's kind of a little violent. Like there's some moments of like a hand getting cut off or like some torture or being stabbed, like, I mean, common lightsaber shenanigans, right? But, that wouldn't necessarily be for kids. I don't know. Do you still feel like this is a safe one for kids?
That is the flip side. So you talk about Kenobi or Love and Thunder?
Kenobi.
But
But
Kenobi,
we could go back to Love and Thunder if we want.
Well, no. I'm just trying to clarify, because the flip side of my observation with Disney, which is that, they kind of have a tendency to plug in, you use content that kind of betrays their emphasis on kid friendly and, kid target audience type stuff, is that they also are very adult in some ways.
Mhm.
And just kind of like you're pointing out, like some of the violence is, ooh, well, that might be a little bit, a little spicy for the young ones. But and I guess that's one of the kind of the weird things about Disney is that they kind of seem to have both agendas at the same time. And I don't know. And this is something where, I mean, my entire time as a film critic, I've wrestled with this because, and I don't know if it's just because I'm not a parent, but I try to look at this stuff from the perspective of a parent and think, okay, well, is this, our kid's going to be afraid of this? Is this going to be too scary? And it seems like anytime I come to a conclusion, I come to the wrong conclusion, right? Because kids are going to hate this. Oh, but then for some reason, like I remember, like kids loved The Greatest Showman. Like I thought, why on earth would kids get into that? And okay, whatever, or this is probably going to be kind of scary for little kids. And then somebody posts on Facebook, no, my kids loved it. Like, all right, I give up. Maybe it's, and it seems like such a subjective thing.
Yeah.
That, because I guess it depends on what your kids are watching, right? Because if your kids are 5 years old and they're watching Jurassic Park, then Kenobi's gonna be just fine. But if they're 12 years old and they're still watching Pixar movies, then yeah, maybe it's gonna be kind of scary. I don't know. I mean, these are kind of extreme examples, but it does seem like every time I try to predict how a general youthful audience is going to react, I can't pin it down. I just feel like I can't pin it down. And then just like you're pointing out, Disney has a way of kind of presenting content that's very mature, and also, has a way of kind of dumbing it down for the kids too in other ways. So,
it's funny.
I don't know if that answers the question.
I agree. I've thought about that a lot. One of my complaints I've complained about before on our podcast is that like these superhero movies are about superheroes and they're all PG-13 and they all push the limits on violence, and many of them are actually containing like sexual and other inappropriate jokes, like
language,
Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and there's plenty of language in Thor, Love and Thunder, and other jokes that I just that just kind of go a little bit too much for a little kid. And I don't see that in a lot of the Star Wars properties. I really don't have any complaints about them. In fact, my kids, they sat with me and watched a few like parts of some of the Kenobi episodes, and they weren't things that like I kept from them. Like there was nothing in them that I felt was too much. And there's what looks like there's about to be a torture scene between Reva and Leia, and it doesn't really turn into that. It's like empty threats. Mm-hmm. Or actually, I guess they're not empty threats, but she gets interrupted and then it doesn't happen. And so, like I didn't see, there really wasn't anything in there that I had a problem with. To me, it was almost like PG, and I don't know what it would be equivalent to for TV rating. Yeah. But the Marvel stuff is definitely too much. I mean, we've started a couple of them, even like Shang-Chi. There's just a ton of superhero violence, and I really wish we could get some PG superhero movies, because they really should be for little kids. Like like a PG Spider-Man or Thor or Hulk that was just like, sure, it has some violence, but it's just a little bit muted, and maybe jokes that are a little bit more on their level.
Interestingly enough, by comparison, the Spider-Man movies are a lot more tame. Like I've watched like Homecoming with my nieces, where my sister would have words with me if I were to show my nieces Guardians of the Galaxy, especially like you say, the second one. And maybe that's just kind of where Star Wars is at an advantage for, at least for parents, in that whereas Marvel movies are kind of set in our universe, therefore they're going to have sexual innuendo, and they're going to have profanity and things. Violence is really the only thing that's a concern in Star Wars, because it's a galaxy far, far away. And so,
but even then, normally the lightsaber and blaster violence is not the same as blood, guts.
No, it's everywhere. Really pretty.
I agree. In fact, I took my 6-year-old to the last Spider-Man movie that came out in December, and it was fine. I mean, he wasn't actually feeling very good and ended up like sleeping, and so it wasn't a great experience for him. But like when
Aw.
I watching the whole thing, I wish he could have seen it. Like I wish he would have been
Yeah.
awake fully because it
Yeah.
was great for
Would have
him.
been fun.
Did
But
you?
that also kind of made me wonder. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, did you show your kids Into the Spider-Verse?
Yes. Oh yeah, they loved
Because
it. In
that,
fact,
yeah,
my 8-year-old saw it at a birthday party, came home, talked it up, and we watched it, and we downloaded it on Google Play or something and watched it as a family, and we loved it. I didn't
Yeah.
think there was
Yeah.
anything in there that was too much for them.
no, not at all.
Yeah. Which makes me wonder, like you mentioned about how like the Marvel movies take place in our day,
Mhm.
and Taika Waititi is so big into pop culture. I mean, there's tons of little pop culture jokes, even the way
Yeah.
they mess up Jane Foster's name. You know,
Oh, you
Jane
called her
Fonda,
Jane Fonda.
Jane Fonda, Jodie Foster,
Jodie Foster.
and it's Taika himself doing it as Cord, and like I'm like, are they going to? Is he going to be able to do that kind of stuff in a Star Wars movie? And I wonder if he could create his own little sort of pseudo pop culture in the Star Wars movie, because you know how like there's music, there's like the Cantina band, you know, in the
Yeah.
original, and
Yeah.
I kind of wonder if he's really going to create some sort of his own set of like pop
Mhm.
culture jokes that we would understand that they're jokes, but maybe not fully because we aren't in that, you know, in that universe.
My guess is that he is going to use a lot of humor that's going to send up the Star Wars universe in a way that we will laugh
We'll
at.
understand it and
Like,
laugh at it.
like
Yeah.
in the way that every movie has to have a character say, "I've got a bad feeling about this." He's probably going to
Mhm.
find a way to turn that into a joke. And
Yeah,
like, I think
turn it on its head
I
a
don't
little
think he's
bit.
necessarily going to invent a bunch of, you know, Star Wars universe celebrities to make reference to in terms of pop culture. But I think that his humor is very much going to do to Star Wars movies what Ragnarok did to MCU movies. And for that reason, I'm excited to see it. I would love to see that. You know, just for kind of the refreshing change of pace, let him do his thing. You know, maybe
That's so
love and
cute, but they're not going to let him do his thing. It's still going to be so corporate. But that was cute.
Never tell me the odds unless the odds are in my favor. He's going to take little like common Star Wars refrains, like common lines, and he'll twist them a little bit, probably,
Yeah.
huh? He'll
Yeah.
change them up,
Yeah.
Taika them, and so yeah, I think we'll see something, hopefully something somewhat fresh and original.
So exit question then. Is Taika Waititi going to save Star Wars?
I don't think he needs to save Star Wars. I mean, we're still fresh on Mandalorian, and we're not. I mean, what was the last Star Wars movie that came out technically?
The last movie was Rise of Skywalker, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, maybe he does need to save Star Wars.
Oh, well said.
Well, he did direct the finale of Mandalorian, and Mandalorian was, I think, universally well received and well liked, and so he does make sense for him to be the guy, but he's supposedly coming up with an original story that's going to expand the universe. I mean, the Star Wars universe, not our universe as we know it.
Hey,
although that would be quite a feat.
Who knows? You know, what do you think, Danny?
I think everyone's going to have to watch the YouTube version of this episode to see the range of emotions that came on my face when you asked that question. That answered.
Is that your audition? Are you auditioning for with your range of emotions?
Yeah, maybe I'll be cast for the Taika Waititi Star Wars project. I'm really hoping, because I would love to say those kind of lines to just trash on the things that I love.
Well, we of the Utah Film Pod would be honored if you would represent us in a Star Wars production.
What if there's people out there that will only watch the YouTube reviews of this episode, the 5 to 10 minute versions panning or criticizing this episode? Isn't that more your flavor, Danny, instead of watching the whole thing?
I would love that. Please, someone start doing that.
So another exit question then. So Danny, what's it going to take to persuade you to either watch an MCU movie or a new Star Wars series?
I mean, honestly, I feel like I don't want to go back. I think MCU, if it was like kind of how Into the Spider-Verse is, where it's like it's its own thing.
Yeah.
So like anything where it's like kind of a reset button, independent. I don't want them connected anymore. I have a hard time watching that. Star Wars. I feel like Star Wars is just done. Like that was something that I actually kind of liked with Rise of Skywalker. There wasn't much, but one thing that I did enjoy was just like how, you know, you start with Anakin Skywalker kind of coming out of nowhere, and then all Skywalkers are gone by the end. And so it's like it's the full story of an entire family, you know?
So conclusive.
Yeah. So it's just like it feels very done. And the same thing with Marvel, like Endgame, it feels very done. So I don't know. Maybe I need to get into Star Trek or something.
There's a lot to choose from.
I know, right?
You would be tied up for quite a while. Yeah, no, in fact, we're already so far into this episode, we probably shouldn't go down this tangent, but I was going to say, like, I consider myself a Star Trek fan, and yet I've really only watched like 1.5 of the shows. Like most of the series out there, I've never touched, and who knows if I'll ever get around to it.
Wait, did you mean like Mandalorian and
Well, no,
Obi-Wan
like
Kenobi?
so I grew up with like the original Star Trek was on like Saturday afternoons on reruns, right? Because they three seasons in the 60s that were brand new, and they spent like the next 20 years in syndication, and that's how I saw.
Oh,
And then
Star Trek. Okay.
yeah, and then later on when the Next Generation came out, I honestly just didn't like it that much. I liked some of the characters. I liked the movies that they made out of the Next Generation cast, but I only watched a few episodes of the actual Next Generation. Then I have not watched any of Deep Space Nine or Voyager or Picard or any of the stuff that's come out. I've watched the movies. I did enjoy the J.J. Abrams movies, but yeah, so maybe. Well, now I would say we could talk about Star Trek more next time, but it sounds like we already have something to tease, right, Danny?
Oh,
What's
yes.
coming up in our next episode?
So here's the thing, you know, Mark's giving me a lot of flack for not watching things, and I just prefer to spend my time elsewhere with things that are worth my time. And so when we come back next time, we will be discussing the Jane Austen adjacent kind of releases that are coming out this week. And I'm super excited for them. I'm a huge fan of novels, adaptations. So y'all are going to have to, you know, dust off some old books, and we'll have to discuss when we get back.
So what are they called? What are the two main ones that you're
So
see?
the theatrical release is Mr. Malcolm's List, which is technically a contemporary novel, which,
Mhm.
you know, I'm interested by those kind of things. You know, I liked Bridgerton, love Pride and Prejudice and zombies. So, you know, I like to see.
That's
what
another
that-
one I've seen.
Oh, hey, look at you.
Yeah.
You'll be in great shape, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So that's one. And then the other one that's coming out on Netflix is Persuasion, which I remember loving Persuasion as a kid. So I'm excited to see how this one holds up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, guys, and we'll look forward to that discussion coming up in maybe another week or so. And in the meantime, be sure to get on to whatever platform you're watching this on, whether you're watching it on YouTube, whether you're listening to it on Spotify or any other platform out there. Give us a positive review, 5 stars, or maybe just forget to. If it didn't like it, just maybe kind of forget that you listened to the podcast. And
Instead, just roast Josh's Facebook.
yeah,
post.
it's
Sure.
because you'll be in good company. But yeah, until next time, have a great middle of your July, and be excellent to each other. See ya.
See ya.